Okay, recording has started, and
Uh,
here we are again, my
yeah,
friend. Uh,
that's a cool shirt, man. I like that.
My golf shirts.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I have that's dress up. Everything else is a t-shirt.
Well, there's nothing wrong with t-shirts.
Is it any wonder that most of what Harmon Waits wears are t-shirts? I think
Right,
I put a
exactly.
button-down shirt on him in the first scene of the first book, and ever since then, he's
Yeah,
either been in his bomber jacket or he's been in a t-shirt.
yeah. I think he's got a style and I like it.
He does. He does. So I got my new book cover and I showed it to you. The main changes I made is they had him flying backwards, but they didn't have him with any clothes on that I could see. And he had kind of hippie looking hair. So I said, shorten the hair, put some pants cuffs on him, and hey, put that bomber jacket on and have it flapping open, flying back when he's flying backwards.
There you go.
All the changes that I had, because I thought the other part of it was great, and
Yeah,
I won't do a reveal here, but I thought the other part of I thought they did a really good job on most of it, the scene and the opponent and all of that. It was just Harmon Waite that I had a few changes on, and
you don't
maybe
want to reveal. You don't want to reveal the big opponent.
nah, that's okay. Well, I don't think it's that big a deal, but
I think.
I think we'll leave that for another time, because today I'd really like to talk to you about some of the things that you've been doing.
Yeah,
I went out on, what was it, SoundCloud the other day, and just happened to find a bunch of new music that you put out, and I was
yeah,
trying to listen to it this today more.
yeah,
I listened to part of it yesterday, and I listened to part of it today, and was just enjoying the music and thinking, well, he's doing all this good stuff, and we haven't really talked about it that much. I think we've talked about your play that you're working on. And so
yeah,
I kind of like to start with that, and then just some of the things. I mean, you throw all this free music out there on SoundCloud, and it's really, really good. And as usual, the writing is what, I love your voice and everything you do, but the writing, just grabs me. And
yeah,
so you've got some excellent writing. What was it? The Color of My Blues was one of them.
yeah,
And what was another one? It was I'd rather be a fool tomorrow than a coward any day. Right.
yeah,
That was I'd rather be it was talking about love, right? That was a beautiful song talking about how you have to, even if you've been hurt, you still
yeah,
got to go back into the fray and search for relationships and hope for love,
yeah,
because that's the only way to do it. And if it makes a fool out of you tomorrow, at least you weren't a coward today. At least you were still out there trying, which a lot of people aren't. Right? You
right.
get hurt too many times, you get older, and the hormones aren't pushing you around, and you just kind of do your thing. Which a lot of
Yeah.
what happens with me today. I'm just doing my thing, and I'm so darn busy. I don't even know where I'd put a relationship. But the song had meaning for me, and it had a lot of depth to it, just because it was sort of a clarion call for love,
Yeah,
rather than just a particular love song. And so
yeah.
I love that, but your writing usually does really appeal to me. So there's
That I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm getting ready to go into the studio is what the deal is. And I've got a whole bunch of songs that I've written and I need to narrow it down because I have a plan for how often to release these new songs, right? But in order to do that, like eventually they'll all get recorded, right? But right now I'm trying to narrow down which ones are the first ones to get released on Spotify and on the radio. And that's a tough thing to decide, I mean, especially since I haven't had an album come out since 2017. I mean, that's a long time in between albums.
Mhm.
And I want to put out something that really is indicative of the love and the passion for life and fellow man that I found throughout everything that happened with the Hemingway. The very first album was a lot more fun stuff, some party songs, stuff like that, right? And then you had the Hemingway album, which was everything was an art piece. And so even though it got a lot of critical acclaim, I only sold like, I don't know, 1,500 copies, like something really small, right? Um, because people just weren't as into as far as like a listening audience, people don't necessarily want to sit down and listen to an art piece the same way they do a fun party song, right? And so I didn't want to go back to just doing, another fun party album, even though I've got some of those songs in there. I was like, I need something that's going to follow up this big art piece with something that's pretty meaningful. And everything that I've kind of come to understand over the last 5 years since that one came out, 6 years now, I guess, because uh, Hemingway, with the way that I did that tour, where everything was a nonprofit, like all the money went back into the suicide prevention and all the shows were free, and it appealed to a totally different audience. The people who would come and sit through that show were there for a meaning and a message, as opposed to people coming to dance or drink or whatever. And so I didn't want to completely get away from that meaningful message stuff that I had done, because it was so important to me when I was doing it. And so I decided to put out a bunch of songs that were pretty meaningful. And then based on how many people are listening to them in their demo, because all of those things that you're listening to right now, I just recorded at home on my little home studio. And you can even you can hear the fire crackling in my fireplace in the background, a couple of them. I mean, it literally is just me sitting at home singing my songs. And then it lets me know
sound because of that I was actually enjoying. So
yeah, it's kind of cool. I mean, that's the kind of thing where later on I might, pull those down off of SoundCloud and turn those into just a home recording album kind of thing. Like, this is just me and my songs. But I can tell from who's listening to those. Like, I get these little statistics that show me how many people have listened to which songs and how much of it. And I can tell which songs seem to be resonating with people. And then, of course, I get on social media also and say, you guys give me your feedback. Tell me which songs you like the best. Because studio time costs money, and it's not a small amount of money. Studio time costs quite a bit of money. So I need to go in and just pick the first 3 to maybe 5 that I'll be recording. And so, to hear that song had meaning to you is important to me. Like, that song came from, I had a friend of mine, female friend of mine, and we had been friends for a long time. And we were out at breakfast at 3 in the morning one time, just the two of us at a Waffle House eating waffles, and just mutually, I just looked across the table at her and I said, I love you. And she said, oh my God, I love you too. And we had this wonderful relationship together that was sadly short-lived. It was only about 6 months, because toward the end of that wonderful, passionate, amazing 6 months, we were sitting on the couch one day, and she looked at me and she just started crying. And I asked her what's wrong. And she said, we can't see each other anymore. I said, why not? This is wonderful. And she said, because we're going different directions. We want different things in life. And she said, I want to settle down and get married and have babies. And you don't right now. And I said, you're right. So we had an amicable split, a very tearful, amicable split, but it just sucked. And I was angry. I was like, man, this is just not fair. I find this person that I've been friends with for all these years, that I've had this wonderful time with, and everything we do is full of excitement and fun and laughter and passion, and the sex was amazing, and, just everything was perfect. And then just poof, it gets taken away because you're going different directions in life. I was like, this is just not fair, So I actually sat down, literally still had tears in my eyes. I sat down to write that song, because whenever I get really upset and I'm having a hard time dealing with feelings, one of the things I'll oftentimes do is just start writing it down in the form of poetry or a song. And by the time I'm done, a lot of those feelings have come out, and it helps me process. So that song, you would laugh to hear how it started, because it started off as an angry rock song. And by the time I was done writing it, literally by the end of that, I guess it would have been the next day somewhere, I probably stayed up all night long. I was like, this is worth it. I would rather be a fool tomorrow than a coward, any day. And that's that kind of realization is where songs like that come from. And so I want to make sure that I'm recording things that have that kind of meaning behind them, but I also don't need them to be necessarily as artistic and, down the rabbit hole as the Hemingway stuff was. So
yeah, but there is a lot of, just that story has so much meaning in it, because to me, I listen to what you're saying there and I think, well, I would have written an angry song. Yeah. And so to take that, to go through all of those emotions and come out another side that is a better side, and have a message about the real power of love and the need for love, more than the power and the need. Let's put it that way. They're equal. So the power and the need for love in our lives was quite a journey for you to make when you're right. One. You did. That's interesting. I think that song, I think that story is worth telling as you talk about that song. And I don't know, I love Hemingway, right? And I love it because it is a mixture of song and story.
Yeah.
And for anybody that's not listened to it yet, it's extremely powerful because it blends those two modes together of storytelling. And when I hear the story behind that song now has deeper meaning for me. And so I like that you're telling the story, and hope somewhere in there that you get to keep telling it as you bring out this album or that bring out these songs in whatever form you do.
That's honestly one of the things that I'm thinking about as you and I are working on the stuff with, NFTs and having a community, like the community of readers for your books. Not everybody that hears my album, my new singles, or my new album is going to want to hear all those stories. Some people just want something nice going in the background, and that's okay. I'm just glad that people are listening. And then there's some people that are going to go, man, that song really seems to have meaning. I wonder what the story behind that is. And I've thought about, like, while I'm in the studio, just, sitting at the microphone and telling the story behind every one of those songs that I record. It's so that I can use that as a second piece, where if you want the stories that go along with the songs, you can know the whole thing behind it. Like the song that All You've Got to Lose, when it says, sometimes I can't even tell the color of my blues.
Yeah.
That song came out of me sitting in jail.
That
was
what were you doing in jail, darn it?
I made some bad choices, John, a whole string of bad choices. And they sort of culminated with me ending up in jail. And I had a buddy of mine. This was so crazy. I'll tell you this story because you'll enjoy it. So I think only on my second or third day in jail, and I was sitting down at lunch. And jail is this very regimented place where you stand when you're supposed to stand and sit where you're supposed to sit, and there's not much freedom to move around. So I'm sitting there with this tray in front of me, and I noticed someone has walked up, and stood right behind me. And I was like, oh God, oh, here it comes, and in my mind, I'm running through all these visions of, jail movies where like everybody's smashing each other with trays and stuff. I'm like, all right. And I've grabbed my tray. I'm like, oh, right, here we go. And somebody and this person leans down next to me, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I hear this guy's voice go, Dan, what are you doing here? And it turned out to be one of my really close friends. And he had screwed up and it was like one of those parking ticket warrant kind of stupid things, right? Where they just knocked on his door and said, hey, there's a warrant for your arrest. You're coming with us. And so they just rounded him up at his house, and he had to go in and, serve time to get rid of all of his traffic tickets and stupid crap like that. And so over the next, I don't know, week or so, we played dominoes and Uno and cards, and I just told him my story about everything that I'd done and all the bad decisions I'd made. And at the end of this whole story, he sits there, and he's very, very wise. He's very young. He's a lot younger than me, but he's always been an old soul and a very wise one at that. And he sits there and he ponders, and he goes, Dan, life is only made of all you've got to lose. And I was like, God, now I got to write a song about this, and he challenged me in that moment. He said, this life is a difficult one. And if you're not paying attention, you can lose all the things that are important to you. If you're not paying attention, life will take away from you the things that you hold most dear. And you've got to fight for them. So he said, I'm going to challenge you that when you get out of here, to make a list of the things that are most important to you, that you never want to lose, that you will every single day look at that list and fight for those things and make sure that you put them as priorities in your life. And I did. And so when I got out of jail, and I was on probation forever and all that kind of stuff, I never didn't write any songs while I was in jail. I was a little distracted. So, but when I got out, I wrote this song, and I realized that there were only two things that I put on my whole list. Like there's, nothing really means much to me except for my family, and particularly my kids, but also my mom, my sisters, my extended family. And then the ability to make music and share the importance, the spiritualism, the beauty of music with other people. Like those are the two most important things in my whole life. And so that was it. That was my list. And it was like, all right, so just don't do anything that's going to take those things away, and everything else will be okay. And so that's why all the lyrics of that song are, it starts off, I've been given answers all my life to questions I've not even asked. And that's what it is. It's like if you're not paying attention, you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff heaped at you. Life is full of all kinds of distractions. But what it really comes down to is, what do you stand to lose if you screw up? So that's kind of where that song came from too. So all those songs that you're listening to have really deep meaning for me like that.
And I think it's a really good idea, whether it's here or in the metaverse, that they show up, to have, the stories around them,
Yeah.
and to be able to share that with people. I know when I watch a movie that means something to me, the first thing I do is go to the extras, how the movie was made, what the stars thought, what the directors and people thought about it. And if I really like the movie, I even go back and listen to the director's commentary.
Yeah.
How he created that movie. And
Yeah.
and so if I cared about it, I want to know more. And so I think it's a good idea to put that out there. And
Yeah.
people that want it should be able to find it. They don't have to have it shoved at them. They just should be able to find it, right?
Well, plus, I mean, when we were younger, when you got an album, whether it was a vinyl album or a tape or even a CD, you would open it up and there was a fold out of the liner notes, and that's where people would tell a lot of stories, and that's where you would find out, what
each album was its own work of art, right?
Exactly.
I remember that very well.
Yeah, and now in the age of digital streaming, that has gone. I mean, I'll bet you can't remember the last time you had an album where you got to read all the liner notes, because it just doesn't exist in digital streaming.
Yeah, no, I haven't had albums in 30 or 40 years. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's what I'd like to do, is figure out a way to reincorporate the idea of liner notes, so that people who, get into music can go find that stuff.
Yeah. And so the key there would be, how easy is it to access, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing I like about having the website. I can stick anything on there in any way I want to, and I have total control over it. So I'll give you that as a thought. I love what Creatoki is doing for us, but I love the idea that, like I said, I've got that treasure hunt getting ready to go on, and I had a little thought. Well, I've got a phone number for people to call. They can hear Harmon Wade talk, right? Which is just you doing the voicemail thing.
Yeah.
That's great. And then I clicked and went, well, wait, some of these people are coming from overseas, and I don't know what an overseas call will cost for them. And they may want to hear it, but they may not want to pay the cost. So I've got to put, that that voicemail out there somewhere where it's pretty cool, and would add to the contest and not take away from it. And so I came up with the web page, and I just recorded your voice off of the Google record, and actually like it because it sounds like a voicemail, and put it out there, and was able to accomplish what I needed to in an hour, right? And that was the best part of it. But I had total creative control. I could do it immediately, and it was useful. It solved a problem. And so websites, kind of, I don't know what you're doing with yours right now, but maybe that may be an option for you. So
yeah, that's not a bad idea. Just, and to that point, that if you can let people be aware that if you're into the music and you want to hear about it, if you go to the website, then that's where I keep all the other stuff too. And so that's not a bad idea, just to, sort of make your website a catalog or compendium of all the different stuff. I mean, if I wanted, I suppose I could go back and record all the stories from all the previous songs too. I mean, like, nothing stopping me. I've got a whole recording rig here.
There you go. Yes, you do, and it's a good one. Yeah. So I think that that's just good in general. And if you tell the stories, I guarantee you I will listen to them. I love your stories. I was thinking about a couple of things today, and most of them were story related. One of them was the story you told me about that turning point in music where you were playing, you thought, to an empty club, and how that worked out. And so I'd love to hear that story again, because I haven't heard it in a few years from you. So I'd love to hear it again.
Like right now.
Like right now. So I really would. That's one of the most memorable stories that you've told me. And then the other thing, I'll just tell you, the other thing I really would like to hear is some of the stories, because you were almost like a different person with the Salt Cedar Rebels, was it? And so you were almost like, that was like a different life. And it was a life on the road, and you had a different look, and you had different types of music being played. And I don't know anything about that period in your life. I just see the songs, right? So I'd love to hear a story or two from that. So that's sort of was sort of what I was going to ask you about today.
Yeah, of course, man. That song, the one that you're talking about, is the story behind a song called Troubadour's Prayer. And it got its very title from the idea of the old-fashioned, in Texas, this is still a thing. It's not as much of a thing in a lot of other places, but now there are a lot of people who just travel around and they make just enough living singing their songs from town to town, basically, to do what it is that they love. You know, it's a very solitary life. And a lot of times you are playing for nobody or next to nobody.
Shades of Israel.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was inspired when I was playing music as a hobby. I was inspired because I went to a music festival, and it was a songwriter festival where everybody there was just a troubadour, just a quiet singing, you know, individual singer-songwriter. And I saw this guy who I knew of his music, and he was a musical inspiration to me and role model, but I'd never met him and I'd never seen him play. His name was Walt Wilkins. His name is Walt Wilkins. And he is widely considered one of the most, if not the most influential songwriters in Texas among the troubadour style. And that night I watched him play to a very small room, maybe 100 people, but it was just completely silent in there. I mean, absolutely silent, because everyone was just hanging on every word that he said, every story that he told, every song that he played. And I mean, he just had people in tears with the beauty of this music. And I thought to myself, that's what I want to do. That's the kind of music that I want to make right there. So I talked to him afterward, and I said, you have really inspired me. I'm going to, you know, take the leap and go from being just a hobbyist to actually putting out music and become a traveling troubadour. And he said, oh man, God bless you. It's tough life, but you know, if you're passionate about it, the world needs people that do that. So I wish you the best. Well, you fast forward about a year, and I was playing a show for what I thought was going to be a ton of people. You know, I'd put out the invite on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And when the show started, it was literally just me, the bartender, and the sound guy. That was the only people in the entire place. And I was just playing to like an empty room with no one listening to my music. And I sat there on stage singing, thinking, this is the dumbest thing I have ever done in my life. I'm wasting my life. I'm wasting my time. And worse than that, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares to listen to this stuff when I'm pouring my heart out in these songs, you know? And in the midst of singing that same song, I was reminded instantly of that night in a very similar type of bar where all those people sat there silently and just hung on every word that Walt said. And I thought to myself, I wonder when he did this, how many times he had to sit there and play to a room of absolutely nobody. You know, how many times has he sat exactly where I'm sitting, wondering if this is the dumbest thing he's ever done? And yet he's the one that inspired me to pour my heart out and really write my truth and my heart into my songs and to do this. And I thought to myself in that moment, you know what? It means so much to me that he makes that music. I'm going to continue to make this music, and I'm going to sing for that bartender and that sound guy as if they were 1,000 people. And one of these days, if I'll just keep doing that, there will be 1,000 people sitting there. And I had this moment of faith, and I began singing that song. And we're still in the midst of the same song, by the way. This took no more than 3 minutes. And I just start belting it out with everything I've got, man. I just pour everything into this song. And the moment that I did that, the door to the venue was right beside the stage. And it goes blam, and it slams open. And the entire place floods with people. I mean, just absolutely packed. And it was all these people who had been, you know, signed up to go. So they all knew my music. They were making requests. They were singing along. It was everything that a troubadour could hope for. And I just sat there so overwhelmed with emotion that I just, you know, fought back crying. And when I finished that show, I said that was like an answer to a prayer. It was like stepping out in faith and saying a prayer and then having it answered. And so that night I wrote that song, The Troubadour's Prayer. Well, 1 year after that, I was playing in New Mexico, which is where I saw, in the same town, Red River, New Mexico, where I saw Walt Wilkins play that first time when he inspired me. And there's this guy in the audience who, after the show, he says, hey man, come here, come sit at my table. I want to make an album with you. And I said, okay, drunk guy, sure you do. And he goes, no, 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 I really do. He says, I know this guy and this guy and this guy. And this stuff happens all the time. You know, somebody says, you know, they start dropping names and, you know, but it starts to become apparent to me that this guy really knows what he's talking about. And I said, who are you? Like, what do you do? And he says, well, I work with Walt Wilkins. I said, you have got I said, you have got to be kidding me. And he said, he said, we're going to make an album. So that Monday I got back from New Mexico, and I got back to back when I was living in Amarillo, and there was an email waiting on me, and it said, hey, Dan, I'm serious. We're making an album. I'm flying to Amarillo, and then I'm going to bring you down to Austin. We're going to record this. So he flew to Amarillo, and we did this pre-production meeting where I sang him my songs and I told him the stories. And so I sang him the song Troubadour's Prayer, and I told him the story about how Walt had inspired me. And he said, you know what we should do is get Walt to sing that with you as a duet. And I said, Corby, if you get Walt Wilkins to sing this song with me, I will provide sexual favors for you that I cannot talk about. And we both laughed about it. Well, as we're sitting there laughing, his phone chimed with a text, and he picked up his phone and flipped it over and looked at it, and he goes, you got to be kidding me. And he just turned it around to face me, and it said, Walt Wilkins, hey man, how's the production going? And so we took it as a sign, and he texted Walt and he said, I've got a song I need you to sing as a duet with Dan Johnson. And he goes, all right, man, let's do it. So we recorded that as a duet, and it was hands down one of the most magical things. I call them side hugs from the universe. It's like whenever you're struggling or you don't know if you're going the right direction, it's almost like the universe walks up beside you and wraps its arm around you, you know, and says, hey, I got you. You know, you're doing the right thing.
You're paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a side hug from the universe. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do right now.
Okay. Now when we finish this podcast, I'm going to go find that song and listen for you and Wilt singing a duet together. Is it on SoundCloud, or where would I find that?
That one you would have to go to Spotify or YouTube Music or Apple Music. That one's actually on the market. That one's not just a demo song. That was off the first. That one's off the first album. So you have to get that somewhere where you get all your regular music. But it's everywhere you can find music. So
Spotify. Okay.
Yeah. Troubadour's Prayer.
Troubadour's Prayer. Okay, I'll remember that. Yeah. No, that's so beautiful. So beautiful story. So I'm glad you stopped and told it again. Thank you for humoring me on that. So
yeah, you bet, man. So it lets me know. I mean, like when people like you ask me, like, where did the song come from? And then people seem to enjoy, because all the songs, I'm not sure if I've ever written very many songs that don't have a pretty serious story behind them. You know, that's just kind of my writing style. And so I guess there are enough people who want to know what's behind the music that it makes it worth going in and writing it down. One of these days I'll be dead and gone. If I'm not here to tell the stories, nobody's going to know where they came from, you know? So
I think that's more important than you can imagine even. So, but yeah. I used to write poetry, which was always my favorite thing to do. There's no market for it per se, but it was my favorite thing to do. And I can remember pretty much every poem I ever wrote. I remember what was going on and what I was feeling and why I wrote it. And it all had very deep meanings attached to it. So I understand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and you feel my pain, because there's not just a tremendous market for, you know, individual singer songwriters out there doing passionate, you know, solo music either. So it is definitely something that you have to do. I mean, every once in a while, there'll be somebody who will be a standout and they'll make it big, so to speak. But that's never the goal when you make that kind of music. The goal when you make that kind of, because if you do make it big, it's almost impossible to keep that heart and the soul in that music. You know, people want something that's commercially viable, and most commercially viable music doesn't have that much heart and soul in it. You know, there are some standouts that do, but by and large, commercially, you know, palatable music is not super meaningful. And so to commit yourself to making meaningful music basically also means committing yourself to having an extremely small audience.
But they all care, right?
But they all care.
If they care enough, and if you keep producing material, which is what you're going to do if you're enjoying yourself, then there is at least a living in there of some type. So, at least a part of a living, right? Maybe you have to narrate on top of it, but you're a damn good narrator. So what the hell?
Yeah, I get by just fine. Yeah, I've always said I would rather have 10 people in the room who give a shit than 1,000 people who don't. You know, that's That's what, and that's the kind of music that I play. And you know, the glory days, like when you're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I hope it will be. It's like every once in a while you get a theater show, and you know everybody's sitting in their theater seats, and it's all quiet, and then you are singing to 1,000 people or however many people you know the thing holds. And those are magical experiences. But to get to those, you have to know that you're going to spend a lot more time singing to 10 people, you know, and then every once in a while, you know, I always call it the finger of God. You know, God puts his finger on you and says, okay, here, let me remind you what this feels like. I had a great experience, a powerful experience this week with a fan of mine who randomly sent me a message via my Facebook page and said, my mother died yesterday. And of course I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she said, well, I said, how did she pass? She said, she died from cancer. And I said, my heart goes out to you and your family. I'm so sorry. And she said, well, the reason I'm reaching out to you is that your song Bloom, which is about a mom who dies from, it's about a daughter's experience with a mom who dies from cancer.
I remember that one.
Yeah. And she says that has been playing at my house nonstop. And she said, and I've just been belting it out. And every time you get to the part where it says, I can fly, you know, I believe I can fly, you know, she says that's just been my theme song ever since mom passed yesterday. And I just wanted to thank you for making that song and putting that out there. And like, those are the moments where you're like, this is why you make, you know, meaningful music. It's not for the masses. It's for the person who says, I need this because my mom passed away, you know,
which gives your own life meaning. And that's what it comes down to. Are you living a meaningful life, or, you know, is it a throwaway life?
Right.
Yeah, I'd much rather live a meaningful life.
Yeah. So, you and me both.
Yeah,
you and I
we
have
do.
this
And we do. And so we both gone, we won't go into all that because we've only got a few minutes left, but I'd like to hear at least one story about the Saltcedar Rebels.
Okay.
And we got maybe 2 minutes left to tell it. So
yeah, you bet. Let's see, what's another,
I mean, it's just such a different period of time. Yeah. Where'd that come from and where'd it go, if nothing else, right? And what made those changes happen for you?
Yeah, that was the first album. When Corby and I made the album, that was the album that we made. And Troubadour's Prayer was one of the only 2 or 3 slow, meaningful songs on that, because a lot of it was like, we need to get your name out there. We need some fun songs, you know, that people can play on the radio.
Yeah, or dance to, right? It seemed like dancing music to me, darn it.
It was, yeah. And that's so literally like that very first song that starts off, that's the only top 40 hit I've ever had. It's called Better Than This. And it was all over country music TV and all that kind of stuff. I had a great music video that went with it. And the way that song came about was, I had a girlfriend, this is years ago, obviously. I had a girlfriend at the time who was a model. And she was off doing some modeling stuff for some MAC makeup or something, I guess. And I hadn't seen her for like a month. Well, we made plans to go meet in a different city to go to a concert together. So we hadn't seen each other for a month, and she was going to fly in and I was going to drive in and blah, blah, blah. So I'm driving to Lubbock, Texas. And if you've ever been to Lubbock, you know that there's just not much to see in Lubbock, right? No. And so, and there's not a whole lot of reasons to get super happy about going to Lubbock, except that's where this concert was. And I was going to go see some friends of mine open for this other guy named Pat Green, who I just absolutely love. He's kind of a Texas music legend also. And my buddies were opening the show for him. So I had backstage passes and everything. And I'm driving across Texas and I keep whistling and humming this tune. And, you know, as I'm driving along, and I was like, what is that song? That's got to be I don't recognize it. And I keep thinking through all the songs that I know. And I was like, man, where is that song coming from? And it became apparent to me that I was so happy that my brain or heart had unconsciously written a song without me even knowing it. Like the melody and everything was all there. It was all done. And I was like, I just grabbed like a little notepad and I was like, I just wrote down the words to it. And literally from Amarillo to Lubbock, which is less than a 2-hour drive, by the time I got to Lubbock, I went backstage and I said, does anybody have a guitar? I wrote a song on the way here and I need to play it. And so I sat down with a guitar and figured out how the song went, because I could only hear it in my head. And I played it backstage at this concert. And my friends were there and Pat Green was there. And they all said, man, you got to record that song. That sounds like that could be a hit. And so, swear to goodness, that's the first song that I ever recorded, put it on the radio, and it became a top 40 hit. And then Access TV was the first one that found it. One of the guys that Mark Cuban has a TV network, or had a TV network. And they found it. They said, "Hey, we love your song. We love your album. Will you make us a music video? We're going to put it on TV." And like just everything just snowballed immediately. And all of that literally came from a 2-hour trip from Amarillo to Lubbock. You know,
just goes to show you had all directions open in front of you, and you chose the road you went down, right? Because it had more meaning. It had more meaning. But yeah, that I could see all of that, and of course I've watched the music video you're talking about, and it's great. And I always, as I'm showing your music off to other people, I'm always going back there and playing at least one song, maybe that one, right? And playing at least one song from those days, because it was, that was your get up and dance music, and it's more exciting to people to listen to that for the first time if I'm trying to show you off to the world.
Yeah.
And sorry, but hey, this is my narrator, and he's a hell of a musician, so that's that. You know me, I'm going to tend to promote things that matter to me anyway. So.
Oh, dude, I'm just happy people are still listening. I mean, gosh, that album came out in, I don't know, 2014, something like that. And I'm just happy when I still see it pop up. It still gets played on the radio sometimes, and I still have people play on Spotify, and that music still gets played probably just as much, if not more often, than the Hemingway stuff. So I'll be curious to see. There's one song that I put on Spotify or on SoundCloud, and as you just found those songs, because I don't really promote that I'm doing that. Those are I just put out these demo songs from my house, right? And there's one of them that's already had more than 300 listens just since I put it out. And and without any amount of promotion or anything, just people going and finding and listening to it over and over. And I'm like, well, there's that one. Apparently that one's gonna have to go on an album because people keep listening to it.
What's the name of that song? Sorry.
Oh, that song's called Remain. It's a big, beautiful piano ballad.
I'll have to go look. So I do want to mention, for anybody that's watching this and wants to go look, Dan has like 3 different profiles on SoundCloud. So you got to find the right one, right?
I've got my personal stuff where I just follow other people, but the Dan Johnson Music or Dan Johnson US is the one that's got, I don't know, I probably got 20 songs up there or something that I've just recorded at home and put out. So,
and I think your Salt Cedar Rebels album is on there.
Yeah.
So
I think the record label put that on there. I think that one is, I don't think I even control that one. Same way there's a couple of things like on YouTube where you've got to watch ads or whatever, because I don't own, that was put up by the record label. When I had a record label. This new album I'm putting out completely independently. I won't, unless some record label comes along and says, hey, we want to make you some deal you can't refuse. This new stuff I'm just going to put out completely independently.
Yeah, well, good for you. I'm excited. I want to hear more, and that's nice, right? That's always the way it's been with your voice. I just want to hear more. So I'm so glad we stopped and talked about this.
Yeah, me too.
We got a few seconds left. We can't talk anymore, but I'd love to. So maybe we'll do another podcast pretty soon, because I haven't even talked about your play. So we will catch up again very soon. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, and I hope everybody out there is healthy and happy.
Absolutely, man. You too. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
I want an original before.
Oh, do you?
I do.
All right. Let me ask for originals.
I love Mark.
The sun in the west, and 100 miles left in the day. Is that anger or sorrow in this thing you have to say? Then I heard you cry, and you broke the silence, but I was caught by surprise when you asked me why I stayed. Could that doubt really haunt you, as if I won't want you as much at your worst or your best? And if you don't believe that your love's safe with me, but the years put my heart to the test, I won't budge, I won't bend, I will stay to the end. I will square up and call out your name. I will stand by your side, I will always remain. fear, close your eyes. Instead, look through mine, you'll see what you really are. No limits, no flaws, no reason to worry, because I'll be there to hold your hand. Trust me, I'm never far. There's no hill I won't climb, no fight I won't fight. When you cry, I will shoulder your pain. There's no words in my mind, no verse I could write that could ever completely explain. I won't budge, I won't bend, I will stay to the end. I will square up and call out your name. I will stand by your side, I will always remain. If that day comes that you reach out for me, just to find that I've ever moved on, I will watch you from heaven, look down and protect you. You're never alone. I won't bend, I will stay to the end. I will square up and call out your name. I will stand by your side, I will always remain. I'm here by your side, and I will always remain.
Original. Thanks.
Yeah, that, so
Glad you
hold
like it.
on, so is that a new, just tell me, is that a new
I have not recorded that
song?
one yet.
That's your song?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I've not recorded that one yet. I plan on putting that one on the next album. So
So we got to hear
we
an
shall see.
unpublished song.
you got, yep, that's exactly right. Brand new
That's
music.
great.
Nobody gets to hear that.
That's good.
Don't post that on.
So I can't post that one, darn it.
Yeah, you can post it. It's fine. Music is free everywhere anyway. So yeah, I'd rather have people look forward to hearing it on the radio and on the album. Like, oh man, I gotta get that thing. But yeah, no, that one's not been recorded yet. I wrote that one for my youngest daughter.